Hi everyone, my name is Barry McDonough and I'm here interviewing Mark McGuinness for the Indie Author Fringe 2016. Welcome Mark and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Barry. Very nice to be back here.
Before we get into the topic and discuss more about productivity for creative people, tell me a bit about yourself and how this book came about.
Sure. So first and foremost, I'm a poet. That's my own creative form of expression. Growing out of that, my day job is as a coach for creative professionals. So I work with writers, artists, designers, entrepreneurs, anyone where I don't have to have the conversation about why creativity matters. And I also write. I've been blogging for 10 years about creativity, productivity, professional challenges for creatives. And this book's come out of that. It's really a kind of a distillation of everything that I've been writing and thinking over the past 10 years, writing for the past 10 years, coaching for the past 20 years on, as the book subtitle says, how to get creative work done amid the demands and distractions of 21st century life.
Was there something in particular that got you interested in this whole area? Was it something in your own life or something you saw in creative people around you?
It was, well, very often I discover I've got an issue myself, and then I see it mirrored back in my clients. So for me, it was immense frustration that I really wasn't organized enough. And the technology was going faster than my organizational skills. I was spending a lot of time on the hamster wheel of trying to catch up with email and phone calls. And this was even before Twitter and Facebook and all of that. But it just felt that my day was not in my own control, that I was spending all my time kind of chasing my tail. And I wasn't getting the most important work done, which for me has always been writing. And no surprise to see that as soon as I started investigating this, looking into time management, productivity systems, I noticed a lot of my clients coming up with the same issues and the same frustration that, we go into this profession because we love to write. And yet, if we're not careful, writing can be the thing that gets pushed off the schedule by all the other stuff that's supposed to be an accessory to writing.
I think every author who is watching, listening to this is going to be struggling with this on some level. So I think it'd be great if we dive in and we get some really good kind of granular detail on what it is that they can do. Are you open to doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just see if I can get these slides to magically appear.
Because I noticed you've got different stages, and one of the first stages is laying the foundations. I can see your slides, yeah.
You can, okay, so let's go through. So the Brave New World is just a question that we're just covering, that the internet makes life so much easier and at the same time so much harder for authors. And I think if you really want to meet this challenge and overcome it and fulfill your potential creatively as well as professionally and financially, there are three important things to do. And these are the three main areas I want to cover today. So first one is, I call it laying the foundation. So this is about taking a step back, getting off that hamster wheel, and really thinking about how you work best, where the points of frustration are in your working life. Maybe looking at some of the myths about productivity and creativity in our culture and making some big picture decisions about how you're going to organize your time. And, that's what I would invite all of us to do today. This is an opportunity, listening to this, watching the video, to just really, as you do this, just think about, how does this apply to me? What can I learn? Where am I feeling frustrated? And where would I like to be more creative and fulfilled in my daily work? So that's the first step. The second one is doing creative work. In our case, is actually writing. And I'm putting this next as a priority because it's so easy for us to think, well, I better empty my inbox, I better catch up on my phone calls, I better update my marketing, I better do anything other than the actual writing, which is the foundation for everything. And if we're not careful, then all the other stuff, being productive about the kind of the secondary things, can become a form of what Stephen Pressfield calls resistance to actually getting creative work done. That's the thing that makes us procrastinate and avoid our true calling. And finally is dealing with the rest. So this part is, if you like, closer to the traditional productivity system advice, which is about how do you manage your email? How do you keep your commitments? How do you make sure that you never forget something important? How do you plan ahead and make sure that you've got your marketing, your book launch, etc., all fitting in, and not rushing to do everything at the last minute. So those are the three areas that we're going to look at.
So the third area is very much everything outside of your writing life. The first two is all about the writing.
Well, the first two is actually, the first one really helps you make some decisions and distinctions between the two. So it's kind of the overall principles that you want to have clearly in your mind that, for instance, helps you distinguish between doing research, which may be important at a certain stage in the writing process, but if you're not careful, you can end up, I've had some clients who just banned them for doing any more research until they've written a first draft, because very often, as Milton Erickson said, you know more than you know. So, that's one example that a bit of clear thinking up front can save you a lot of time further down. Mm-hmm. So let's start with laying the foundations. And here, the big principle that's maybe slightly provocative that I'd like you to bear in mind is the idea of get more organized in order to get more creative. Now, I know some people watching this are going to resist it because somebody always does. Somebody says, well, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a creator. I'm not here to be a cubicle worker and be organized in, like a typical pen pusher. And I totally get you. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But to give you an example, this morning, I was working on a poem and I spent my whole morning doing that. And I didn't think about anything else. I didn't check my email. I didn't take phone calls. And most importantly of all, I wasn't worried that I'd forgotten something. There was no part of me that was going, is there something else I should be doing? I was totally focused on the poem because I'd done the big picture thinking. I'd set up my systems. I knew that later today I would get on, I would catch up with all the email. I would return the phone calls. I would do all the admin and marketing tasks that were in my plan. And so for me, the most important thing about getting organized, and it doesn't have, I'm not going to give anybody some kind of best practice system. What I'm going to present here and what I present in the book is a menu. And you take what works and you leave what doesn't work. But I would just invite you to experiment with the idea that if you really think about it and you decide, I know when I'm going to be doing my email, I know when I'm going to be doing my marketing, I know when I'm going to be meeting my cover designer and talking about all of that stuff and all the other tasks. And I know that it's not going to be in my writing time. If you can do that, then it frees you up. It frees your mind to focus on, the story or whatever it is that you're writing that's most important to you. So
how do you stop an interruption that happens during that key time? So you've blocked off that very important number of hours, whatever it is, and then something happens. Someone even physically comes in to interrupt you. So your phone might be off, but other things can. How do you deal with that?
Well, physical interruptions, maybe one of the nice things about being a writer is a lot of us end up working at home on our own or in our own office. So there's relatively few interruptions like that. I guess you could improvise a barricade, but certainly telling, if you're in a shared space, then let people know around you when it's okay to interrupt and when it's not. You might even say you're going to have a specific place that you go in order to do the writing. There are lots of writers who do this. The digital stuff is a lot easier because you just switch it off. I've switched this off because I'm talking to you. Now, of course, it does require a little self-control to do that. There is software that you can use, for instance, stuff called, I think Mac Freedom allows you to switch off the internet and lock yourself out of checking email or Facebook or whatever your temptation is. But the big thing I would say here is treat it like a game. Say, whatever my writing time is, this is what I'm allowed to do, this is what I'm not allowed to do. Like, it was one famous writer, I can't remember his name, said he used to sit at the typewriter every morning till 12 o'clock. And he had coffee, a packet of cigarettes, and a typewriter. I said he didn't have to do anything, but the only things he was allowed to do was drink coffee, smoke cigarettes, and write. And so obviously he spent the first 20 minutes drinking the coffee and smoking the cigarettes. After a while, he got so bored, he thought, well, I might as well write something while I'm here.
Yeah.
So just having rules like that, that let you know what's okay and what's not okay. And again, it's up to you. You decide it. This is your utopia. You can design it any way you want.
Great. I think my problem is I give myself that time and I get some good writing done, which I feel is good. And then I feel I deserve a reward. And that reward is where the problems come in, because that reward might be going onto Facebook. It might be stepping away and having a conversation with someone.
Well, I'm all for rewards. Just save them up till afterwards, and just think about how much. One thing you might think about is how much more rewarding it will be when you've done 90 minutes instead of an hour, or 2 hours instead of 1 hour, whatever it is for you. But it is really important, if you're going to have the self-control or discipline to do this, that you do reward yourself later on, that you can splurge on Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is you like to do. And this is another principle that I talk about in the book, is do more nothing. Don't work all the time, because if you work all the time, you might be productive in the kind of traditional corporate sense, but you certainly won't be creative. Creativity needs us to take time away and come back.
Okay.
It's nice to remind myself of that this morning. I was very frustrated with my poem. I'm hoping it will look easier and it will flow better tomorrow, but we'll have to wait and see.
But say that again, do more nothing?
Do more nothing, yeah. So this is, I got this idea from when I spent time in a Buddhist monastery doing silent meditation retreats. So 10 days of literally doing nothing except walking, sitting meditation, no TV, no reading, no books, certainly no phone. And actually what happened then was every morning, almost about 10 past 10 exactly, I would have an insight about something that was happening in my life at that time. And I would have no conscious idea beforehand what it was going to be, but it was quite weird. But by the end, it became fairly regular as clockwork. And that really highlighted to me that creativity, problem solving, you can't push it. You can't force it. You can create the conditions and then get out of the way. And it also made me really aware that the morning is the best time for my writing. And so I've always kept that free for writing, and the afternoon is fine to use for other things because I'm not particularly good at writing. My brain's a bit slower and more sluggish after lunch. So, that again, that's another example of just trying to work a little smarter, as they say, rather than just nose to the grindstone all the time.
So the nothing is like a processing that's going on in your brain. So there is work maybe even happening there, but you're just not aware of it. Yeah,
opinion is divided among the psychologists and neuroscientists about what the effect is. Some people argue, yeah, your brain is working away unconsciously. Other people say it's just simply the fact that you've gone away and you've come back and it's fresh. So whatever theory you subscribe to is fine, but there is definitely that effect of you go away very often exhausted or tired or just convinced that there's no way that you can do this. And then you come back the next day and think, oh, well, actually, maybe. Or, you could be walking the dog or riding your bike or in the shower, or, as lots of people have testified, and the idea comes to you. So certainly working hard all the time is not going to make you a better writer.
Great. I interrupted you there. Please continue. You were talking about...
Good. But so let's have a think. Multitasking. This is another thing. When you're laying the foundations, just try, again, the neuroscientists have confirmed this, that the brain cannot multitask. You can do two things at once, but you can only pay attention to one of them. So having all those browser windows open is not going to work. So, and it really keeps coming back to the boring, simple idea that writers have known for centuries, that just sitting and focusing on that one thing and doing it for however long you can do it each day is much better to do 2 hours of really focused writing than spend a whole day with 6 browser windows open the phone on and having conversations and so on.
So jumping around isn't helpful.
No, no. And again, there's plenty of time to do that later in the day, as we'll see, or, you know, at another time of the day when you're focused on, you know, dealing with all the rest. We're not saying you have to be in a monastery all the time or in completely focused seclusion. So let's move on to the next phase, which is about, we've actually, I guess, jumped ahead slightly into doing creative work. So just picking up on the story about the monastery, one thing I'd suggest you do is notice the time of day or night or evening when you personally find it easiest to do your creative work. So most of us tend to be more alert in the morning, but some are more alert in the afternoon, and others are the night owls of the species. They like to do their best work late at night. And whatever that is, it's important that you ring fence that time, that you know, that is your sacred time. You know, so to me, an hour in the morning is worth at least 2 hours in the afternoon or the evening, because I know that my mind is really clear and sharp, and it's much easier for me to focus at that time of day. And so, for instance, it's really hard to get a meeting with me in the morning. All my coaching clients, unless they're in Australia when you know, the time zones don't allow, I see them all in the afternoon. I work with a lot of them in the States, so it works out their morning is my afternoon, so that's fine. So, you know, and I always, when I'm looking at the beginning of the week, just think, how many mornings have I got? You know, how many mornings have I kept free to get my writing done? And that's the biggest decision for me of the week. If you can do that, the good news is it's, you know, you can, there's plenty of other time that you can be doing other things. So for instance, if you're an evening person, as long as you keep your evenings free to write, then you can do all kinds of things during the day. You can exercise, you can see friends, you can spend lots of time on Twitter and Facebook, you can get really good at emptying your inbox, you can do lots of interviews for podcasts, you can record your, you know, whatever you want to do, whether it's marketing or publishing or, dare one say, having a life outside of writing, as long as you keep your promise to yourself to write in the evenings, then the rest of the day is free. It's like, for me, you know, the fact, if I write in the morning, I get to call myself a writer all day, and I never have to write another word after lunch. So I can, you know, have I have a coaching business that basically fits into the afternoons. So, you know, on the one hand, it requires a bit of discipline and focus to do this, but on the other hand, you're opening up the rest of your time.
And it's really about placing value on time itself. You know, it's almost seeing time as a commodity, and that you are saying, my writing time is probably the most important time of the day. I'm going to do it at my best mentally, when I'm at my best.
Yeah.
And then ring fencing it so that, you know, you won't be interrupted. And I think it's just really about seeing how precious those moments are, that time that you've ring fenced off is.
You know, and the other thing is, once you've ring fenced it, it's not to say you would never write another word outside of it, but I would say, you know, this is the minimum if you really want to make sure that you're fulfilling your potential as a writer. So if it gets to, say, I don't know, 9:30 in the morning and I haven't started writing, I'm thinking, well, hang on, I haven't got much time left. And what is an absolute killer to productivity for a writer is you start the day and you think, well, I've got all day. I'm not in a rush. I can muck about. I can procrastinate. It doesn't matter if I do all the other stuff that we've been talking about. If you're not careful, you can end up giving away your best time of day.
Yep.
So if you've only got 2 hours of an evening, or you've got a morning or an afternoon, then once you see that, you really value it. And also, I generally try and avoid the word discipline. I know I've used it a couple of times, but to me, this shouldn't be something that we have to do. Oh, I've got to do my writing now. It's something that we get to do. You know,
Hmm.
I get 2 or 3 or even 4 whole hours to practice my craft today. Well, that's something I want to dive into and enjoy and savor. So yeah, absolutely right. Treat it as precious time.
Yeah, I think the discipline is a thing artists struggle with. We artists don't like the word discipline because it seems
Yeah.
to confine you and maybe lock you down. But really, discipline leads to freedom. By having strict discipline, you end up with freedom.
Yeah, yeah, that's the way I like to look at it. Another way to kind of frame it to yourself is to say, well, what would your ideal day be like as a writer? So my ideal day is I get up, I write in the morning, and I do other things in the afternoon. So I've designed my day, I've designed my business around that. So we're not talking about discipline as in trying to force your creativity into a system. We're saying design the system around your creativity. If you like to work at night and your family are okay with that, then sleep all morning, or have a nap in the afternoon, or do whatever works for you. And just think, your writing is coming first, just like we're using it in this model, the 3-step model. We make some decisions, put your writing first, and then deal with everything else.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So, I mean, we've touched a little bit on the fending off the distractions, turning off the phone, the email, etc. Another thing I'd like to invite people to think about is, if you like, your warm-up ritual as a writer. So, we're quite familiar with this for sports players and actors and performers, that they'll have a strange kind of ritual. They might put one boot on before the other. They always wear the number 7. They have to be last out of the dressing room, or whatever. And a lot of writers have the same kind of thing, that they have. I mean, to me, I drink in the morning. I have a routine. After the children had their breakfast and gone to school, I meditate. Then I brew the coffee, and it's always the same kind of coffee to the same strength. And I have my little Japanese tea mug that I drink the coffee out of, and I put music on. It's always the same kind of music for a particular piece of writing. And that just, all of these things act as a trigger for my emotional brain, for my unconscious mind, whatever you want to call it. This goes back to my days as a hypnotherapist, when what you're actually doing is you're activating the writing state. It's like the equivalent of double clicking on an icon to open up the app so that you can use the abilities of that app. What you're doing with your brain, whether it's a favorite armchair, a favorite writing pen, a favorite chair in your local cafe, a favorite brand of incense or coffee, or whatever it is you try to set up unique triggers that you learn to associate with the act of writing. And when you do that, it makes for a smoother transition. It makes it much easier and quicker to get into that flow state when you're not even thinking about the distractions, because you're so absorbed in the writing.
Mm-hmm. So yours are music, a coffee, a drink, and it's the location, always the same location.
It is. It's, this is my office. This is my inner sanctum. It depends on the actual writing. So for poetry, I'll use a pen and a notebook quite a lot, as well as the computer. Always the same kind of notebooks, obviously. If I'm writing prose, then I use speech recognition. So typically I will stand up, I have a Bluetooth headset, and I'll walk up and down and dictate to the computer. And I have very large font, size 30.
So what software do you use for that?
I use Dragon. Dragon, naturally speaking, for Mac, which is, Dragon for Mac, or Dragon Dictate. The PC version is even better, but the obviously drawback is you have to have Windows. So I use the Mac version, but they're both pretty good. And so it's no good for poetry because I write that very slowly, but for prose, it really helps me capture my speaking voice and bang that first draft out very quickly. So that's another little technical tip. And there's a chapter about that in the book where I talk about, how it's almost like it frees up that little bit of short-term memory. You're typing and you're typing one sentence and your brain is thinking 2 or 3 sentences ahead, and you're trying to remember it all at the same time as get it down. Well, if you use speech recognition, that delay is gone. You can speak as fast as I'm speaking to you now, it will get it about 90–95% accuracy once you've trained it.
Would that be more for first drafts? Obviously not for editing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. First draft, and then you have to go back and edit. And you've got to be really careful when you're editing, because it will never make a spelling mistake, but it will sometimes make a word mistake. So if there's a very odd word, sometimes my editors go, "What is this doing?" And I don't get it. "Oh, sorry, that was drag and put that word in. It should have been a completely different word." And you've got to train yourself to proofread for that, because naturally when we proofread, we're looking for spelling mistakes and stuff, but we tend to assume that the word that we meant to put there is the one that's actually there. You can get word blind for that. So
I did try it years ago, but I bet you now it's much better. I mean, you can see with Siri how good it is, how good speech recognition has gotten.
Yeah, I mean, these things are only going to get better. And I've been using Dragon for at least 5 or 6 years now, probably even longer than that. And it's really surprisingly good. I discovered it when I had RSI and I couldn't type for 6 months. And it basically saved my writing career, I think. And still, I'm a pretty fast typist, but even when the RSI improved, I thought, actually, I want to stick with this because it's so good.
Yeah.
So, okay. So
there's something you mentioned earlier, which I just wanted to, and I think it probably falls under this, but sleep.
Sleep.
You talked about sleep and the importance of sleep and napping. Is that something you talk about in the book?
Yeah, there's a chapter in the 3rd section about dealing with the rest, about napping. And that comes from a little bit of research. I love all these bits of research that kind of confirm things that I've been doing for a long time, and maybe slightly eccentric habits. That they tested it with NASA pilots, and they found that their reaction times were 40% better if they had a 20-minute nap after lunch. And so I tested this, and because I hate that time after lunch when your brain is a bit sleepy and kind of yawning and you're trying to concentrate, but it's really hard. Having a nap no longer than 20 minutes, set an alarm, and it basically reboots your brain. So certainly if I have to do any writing in the afternoon, I will do that, but I will do it before my client sessions anyway, because I want to be fresh for them. And it really improves the quality of my thinking and therefore productivity in the afternoons. So again, this is another advantage. If you work from home, it's a lot easier to do that, because it's maybe a bit harder to get away with in a cubicle. But sadly, because a lot of...
Or the library.
Or the library. Well, I don't know, maybe there's usually somebody asleep in the library, isn't there? It's a really good library. So yeah, I mean, again, just keep experimenting with what works with you. Like, none of this stuff, don't think, well, I need to do it because that's what it says in the book, or that's what, some productivity person or neuroscientist has said. Test it out. This is an experiment. We use a lot of creativity on our actual writing. We'll just use some of that to redesign your working habits.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so I think that covers, that gives you a whistle-stop tour of the second part, most important part, which is ring fencing your own time. And here, the 2 big things to look out for are external distractions and internal, the temptation to go and do something else, to do anything else, sometimes it feels, rather than actually sitting down and writing.
So would procrastination fit in under this second section? Is this where procrastination comes in?
And this is, again, all of the stuff about having a designated start time. It gets rid of one more excuse, because if on Monday morning, I think, well, shall I start writing now or shall I start writing later? Well, that opens the door to procrastination. But the way I've set it up, I know that 9 o'clock Monday morning, I'm either writing or I'm avoiding writing. So, it's a really binary choice. I can't fool myself in that sense.
And is it a case that you are literally just forcing yourself to sit at your desk, regardless even if you've no desire to write, you still have to physically sit there for that time?
Yes. Martin Amis said this. He said, the art of writing is the art of applying the seat of the pants to the seat of the chair. Yeah. And I think there's so much truth in that. Now, okay, I have a standing desk now, and I stand and I dictate, but the same principle applies. that if, you know, it's like, remember the guy just sat there at his desk with the cigarettes and the coffee. Just say this is the space, these are the rules. But actually, if you can be with a little bit of boredom, which is the big obstacle and the thing that the internet takes away, then on the other side of the boredom is joy. Because, and I've done this, I used to go to the British Library sometimes because it's the most boring environment on planet Earth, maybe apart from the Sahara Desert. But I would go in there, and I'm working on a Chaucer translation. So I'd go in there, I'd get the big red Chaucer book down off the shelf, and I would just sit with it. And there's nothing else you can do in there. Everybody frowns if you so much as cough in the library. And you're not allowed a laptop. I think maybe a laptop, but you're not allowed anything that makes any kind of noise. And yeah, it's really boring to begin with, but actually but it just forces you to concentrate on the writing. And once you break through that, that's when you're in the flow. And that's when, you know, you wouldn't rather be anywhere else. You know, that's the time when you remind yourself, this is why I love to write. You know, when my daughter said this to me yesterday, she's only 7. She said, Daddy, we were doing writing at school and it went very quickly. We had an hour, but actually it only felt like 10 minutes. And I said, yeah, that's it. That shows you're really into your writing. So again, you know, with all of this, we talk about productivity and discipline and temptation and so on, but at the heart of it all should be joy. You know, that you write because you love to write.
Well, what about those writers who say writing is painful, writing is a chore, but you know, the whole process of it, you know, you hear that a lot from a lot of writers.
Well, yes. I mean, I had that this morning, and that's because I was stuck. But, you know, and we're not saying it's unalloyed bliss, but the reason we do it, the reason we go through the suffering is for the moments. And sometimes, you know, some days they might not be very many, or they might not last very long. But when you have the breakthrough, when suddenly it works, when suddenly it flows, or maybe when you look back and you'd struggle through something and you read through it and you think, actually, you know what, there's something here. This isn't too bad. So yeah, I mean, suffering is part and parcel of it, but at the same time, you know, pleasure is part of it too.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move on to the final section. And like I say, I'm putting this last because I used to put it first. And that meant I was really good at getting on top of my email and phone calls and filing cabinet and accounts. And yet I wasn't so good at getting the writing done. So I'm putting it after, but it does require a lot of thought. It does require time, and it does require a bit of training yourself to develop your own systems, your own loops that make sure everything gets captured and processed. And there's 2 principles here that I want to talk about. So the first one is get things off your mind. And what I mean by this is don't try to remember everything. So I'm there this morning writing my poem, and I'm not trying to remember what I've got to do this afternoon because I've written it all down. And it's there in my inbox. And this is something I got from David Allen's classic book, Getting Things Done, which is the kind of productivity Bible for kind of corporate workers. And he talks about having buckets to capture information, to capture commitments. And he says you should have as few buckets as possible. So mine would be my Post-it to-do list, which we'll talk a bit more about in a minute, my email inbox, the kind of message, you know, the answer phone on my phone, and also my diary. So anytime I have an idea, I think, okay, I'm going to do that. Or anytime I make a commitment to somebody, I want to put it in one of those places. And I assume I'm going to forget. I'm never even going to try to remember. Because even if I could, I'd be using up a bit of my valuable bandwidth in my brain. And I want to keep that free for whatever I'm doing in the moment, whether that's writing, whether that's talking to you, whether that's working with a client, or even doing my email. I hope I could be as mindful as possible doing each and any of those things. So again, you know, So the takeaway from this is decide what your buckets are going to be, and then train yourself. Each time you say, okay, I'll do that, put it in a bucket. Each time you say to yourself, okay, I really want to do that for myself, put it somewhere. If it's time limited, put it in the calendar. If it's for today, put it on the to-do list. If it's for another time, then send an email to yourself, or stick it in a project management software, whatever. It almost doesn't matter what it is, just that discipline of putting it somewhere other than in your brain. And that frees up your brain to actually do more creative things.
It's the, isn't it the working memory that we have in our brain? And it's like a desktop or desk space, and you have to have it clear in order to be present and work on whatever's in front of you.
Exactly. And it's not very wide. The neuroscientists, they keep revising the estimates. There used to be this magic number 7 plus or minus 2 kind of chunks of information you could keep in your conscious attention. And now they said, no, it's probably only 3 or 4. So probably by next week, it'll be down to 2 or something. So yeah, it's like, keeping your desk clear so you can see what you're working on right now. And then you work on something else, get another load of stuff out, but put this one away first.
So when you're writing, and it always happens, you remember you've forgotten to do something important. What happens then? You remember, oh, there was that person I was meant to call, or there's something that pops into your interrupts you.
Yeah, I put it in one of the buckets. And actually, there's one I forgot to mention, which is I think it's called Reminders app on the phone. And I can set it, and I could, call Barry, and I could set it, and then it will remind me at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So, and then I switch that off, and I'm back into writing. Yeah. Hopefully, I'm organized enough that it wouldn't be, I need to call him right now, or something disastrous is going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, most of us have got a phone, so have somewhere that you can easily capture this stuff. Evernote might be another thing you would use for that. It's really good at capturing stuff and putting it up into the cloud.
And we seem to, when we are doing work, as part of our brain seems to want to try and distract us with, and even the littlest thing that isn't important seems to become important when we're in that writing zone or in that compartmentalized space. Some things we would never really be worried about suddenly becomes things we should do now.
Well, this is, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will have read Stephen Pressfield's great book, The War of Art, because, Steve really nails that. He talks about the idea of resistance as being the bad part of your brain that wants to distract you. It will use anything to get you away from knuckling down to today's challenge. I had this a few months ago. I remember it was Monday morning, and I was in a place that I wanted to be for years, which was the first thing on my desk on Monday morning was working on a poem. And this should have been bliss. This should have been me diving in with both hands, saying, hallelujah, this is fantastic. And the first thing that went through my mind as I sat down was, I'm learning Japanese as well. And the day before, I'd been working on making some kanji flashcards. And the first thing I thought was, well, maybe I could spend half an hour doing some more kanji cards, because then I will get up to X number. And I was kind of tempted to do it. And I thought, hang on a minute, what's going on? Oh, this is resistance. And just simply recognizing that is my brain trying to distract me. And it's using whatever's, that it'll pick up whatever's nearest. Whether it's something I want to do, something I feel I should do, a thought about somebody else, and it kind of waves it in my face and says, no, look at this instead.
What is behind that resistance? Why is it there? Is it fear? Do you think it's something as deep as fear of success? What is it?
I think there's nearly always fear there. And that's a good thing. So my version of this is, the bigger the dream, the bigger the fear. And if your dream isn't very big, you won't have much fear. So I think as a writer, we want to be dreaming big. We want to be pushing ourselves. We want to be writing a great book, not just a good book. And so in a way, it is a good sign, but I also recommend not analyzing it too deeply. So this is why I love Steve's model. You can just say, oh, it's resistance. That's all it is.
Okay.
You see a bird out and you go, what is that? Oh, it's a robin. Okay, that's all it is. and then you get back to work. So it's the same with resistance. Just acknowledge it. If you need to capture something in the moment, then do it, but don't let that take you off track.
Yep.
Okay, so still in this area of dealing with the rest, another little tip I have is, this is for your daily work. If it won't fit on a post-it, it won't fit in your day. And this is something that I've evolved as a way of dealing with the endless to-do list problem, which is, once you get interested in productivity, it's very easy to start compiling lists of everything. And when I first did this about 10 years ago, I had an electronic to-do app that had over 2,000 items in it. And it just depressed me every time I looked at it. And I kept remembering more stuff to put into it, and more stuff kept coming in. And I just felt like I was drowning in it. It was deeply unproductive. And my antidote to that is to say, every day, there's a limit to what I'm going to be able to accomplish. So if I acknowledge that right at the beginning in an easy to see form, it makes me think about what's important today. So for instance, this is my to-do list for today. Mm-hmm. And this has been finely calibrated, the size of the post-it to the size of my handwriting. You may need a smaller one, or you may need a bigger one. But what I know, so the top left is always the most important thing. So I've got TC up there. That's for Troilus and Crusade, which I'm translating, the Chaucer poem. And that's the main writing project of the day. Mm-hmm. As we go down here, these are things for clients and other mission critical stuff for my business. And down here is more household, more kind of nice to have stuff. Now, I know if I'm running out of space on that post-it, I'm running out of space in the day. Mm-hmm. So this is the thing. If I fill the post-it, then I know I'm going to have a really busy day. So it gets me thinking about, what do I really want to accomplish today? Do I really want to put that in? And what is most important? Now, the flip side of this is I can actually finish work. Yeah? This is a weird concept for any of us who are self-employed, because there's always more to do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if we are keeping adding more and more stuff to the daily to-do list, and that will just happen, you just end up, you never ever get ahead. But during the day, if new stuff comes up, as it inevitably will, then we lift up the post-it. This is tomorrow's post-it. So after 9:30 in the morning, nothing else gets on here unless it's an emergency. And then tomorrow's post-it starts filling up with all, phone call comes in, an email, or I get an idea, and I put all of that in there. And that means I can always finish today, which is motivating. I'll stay an extra 20 minutes in order to complete the post-it and tear it up and scratch it in the bin. And then it also creates a nice little buffer in the day. So something comes in, and I'm like, oh, right, I'm doing this, and now I've got to do that. And I can very swiftly get either panicked, or I can just feel deflated. I feel like I'm never in control of my time. What this does is say, okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do it tomorrow. And when I come to it tomorrow, I've had a whole day, because most things can wait till tomorrow. There's very, very few things that absolutely must be done today. And by the time I get to it tomorrow, depending on which neuroscientist we believe, I've had maybe a whole day of my brain unconsciously working on that and thinking about it. At the very least, I'm coming at it fresh and thinking, okay, how am I going to approach that? So I'm not resenting the time I spend on it.
And it gives you the permission to clock off, doesn't it?
It does.
It's your end of your day. Really, it's like it's yeah. Because as if you're freelance, you're working from home, whatever, your day doesn't have set boundaries, and things kind of can run over very easily.
Yeah. So that's one just nice little thing to experiment with in terms of daily work. Another thing I think is important to think about as authors, particularly, actually this applies if you're self-published or if you're traditionally published, there's there's stuff you have to do to write the book, and then there's stuff you have to do to make and publish and market the book. And again, if you've given place to your writing work, then you've also got a place for all this other stuff. And, you know, whether that means working with your editor or your cover designer or planning a marketing campaign or doing a launch or a promotion of some kind, again, you can give this total focus. You know, unless you've done this, then you can be in the mindset that in the one part of the day you're trying to write and you're thinking, yeah, but maybe I should be connecting with my fans on Facebook or getting back to the cover designer. And you feel guilty about that and distracted. And then when you're overdoing this, there's a little part of you going, oh, well, maybe I should be writing. And so this is what I say about mentally just sorting it all out, give it a place, and then you can be totally in the moment, totally focused, totally switched on with your business brain when it comes to promoting a book or, you know, deciding how it's going to look when it's published, which again it's similar but different to the state that you're going to be in when you're actually writing. Mm-hmm. So particularly if you're in, you know, as most of us who are self-employed, if you have to wear more than one hat, then have a different time of day or a different day of the week for these different roles.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. So, I mean, one of the key messages I'm getting from all this is that routine as well is so important, and you just knowing where you're going to be at each time of the day, what you're going to be working on, rather than changing things up. So your writing time will always generally be at that same time of day. You won't start changing it around to fit with whatever's happening in your life.
Well, in an ideal world, yes. Mm. You know, and I think as writers, we're maybe more creatures of habit than a lot of other kind of creatives, but everybody's different. Some people really don't like the idea of having a daily habit, and I mean, to me, it's whatever works for you. But be honest with yourself. Is not having a routine an excuse to avoid the difficult work? Personally, I find a routine is really helpful for any kind of writing project apart from lyric poetry. You know, it's really hard for me to sit down and come up with an idea for a great poem on the spot. So I'll usually have a longer, either, you know, drafts that I previously have started, or I'll do a longer project like a translation. That means I've got something that I can plow away with every day for poetry. But poetry does tend to be more spontaneous and kind of capture the genie when you can. But certainly for writing any long-term prose work, I find routine is invaluable because it helps you get the momentum.
Yep.
Now, a kind of rider to that is that with all of us, we have different types of day. And so you might have different templates for different days. So my default, it's like on a website, you know, if you're designing a website, then you're going to have, say, a home page, you're going to have a landing page, you might have a blog post page, you might, you know, have a video page or whatever, and they'll all be configured slightly differently because of what you want the page to achieve and what needs to go into it. So you might say, like, I have my default day, which is I write in the morning and I coach my clients on Skype in the afternoon. But I also have another kind of template, which is if I'm with a client all day doing an intensive one-on-one session, then I don't do any writing that day. Mm-hmm. I just go, I spend time with the client. I keep an eye maybe at lunchtime and at the end of the day, usually on the phone, any essential emails, particularly from other clients. But other than that, and I just don't put pressure on myself to write. If I do something, say on the train on the way there or on the way back, that's a bonus. So, you know, don't try and be rigidly inflexible about it, but maybe think about, well, how many different types of day do I have? And therefore, how many templates could I do with designing to accommodate for that?
I won't keep you too much longer, but you've worked with a lot of different authors and you would have seen a lot of different types of routines. What, in your opinion, is the most common type of daily routine authors have? Is it a morning writing routine?
I would say, yeah, mornings are more common than any other time. And there are some people who really resist it and who and who are much happier writing later in the day. You know, they would do, say, all their email and marketing and shopping and tasks in the morning, and then that's all out of the way, and then they can get on with the writing in the afternoon and the evening, which is fine. You know, it's, if whatever works, you know, and the proof is in the production, really.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I've found this incredibly helpful. I know a lot of the people watching probably have too. I'm sure they've taken a lot of great nuggets from it. So where can people find your work? And the name of the book, of course, is Productivity for Creative People.
Sure. So my poetry website is markmcguinness.com, the double N. And the book's Productivity for Creative People at lateralaction.com/productivity. And as of now, it's available for free as an ebook on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, all the usual ebook stores. So if you like the sound of it, then you can get all the ideas and more for free if you go to lateralaction.com/productivity.
Wonderful. Well, Mark, thank you very much. Is there anything you would like to leave the listeners, watchers with? Any final message?
Maybe the quote that I used at the start of the book, which is from Gustave Flaubert, the French novelist. He says, "Be regular and orderly like a bourgeois in your life, so that you may be violent and original in your work."
That's very good.
So,
thank you, Mark, for the time.
Thank you, Barry. I really enjoyed it. I hope people found it helpful.
That was great.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.